After 18 weeks of hard-fought games, blood, sweat, tears, injuries, and all sorts of other ridiculous storylines, we have finally reached the NFL postseason 2025 edition. And it all starts right here this week on Wild Card Weekend. And today, I'm going to give you a breakdown and my personal predictions for all the games. Compared to the regular season, we'll maybe go a bit more in-depth with each game because there's less to cover and everything. But if you enjoy this type of content, definitely like and subscribe, and let's just dive right into things. Starting us off on Saturday at 4:30, the Texans are hosting the LA Chargers. This is a situation where it genuinely feels like the wildcard team is probably the favorite. The Chargers, to me, feel like the better team as of right now. They're not even that great themselves, but compared to the Texans, they're in a much better situation right now, and it seems that Vegas understands that as well, as they are actually favoring the Chargers by a pretty decent spread to win this game as of this recording on Tuesday night. And look, I don't think it's because the Chargers are just a way better team on paper, but with how the season has played out, they've definitely felt a lot more stronger, a lot more consistent, while playing in a significantly more difficult division. The Texans didn't have to do anything to get a playoff spot. They play in the AFC South, which is complete and utter garbage. And even then, against some of their divisional opponents, it wasn't the easiest. It's just been a turbulent year for these guys. I want to have belief in the Texans because there's just so much talent there. CJ Stroud seems like such an exciting player after what happened last year, but it's a different season. He's had a sophomore slump. Not all his fault by any means, but still, he's made some mistakes. He's faced a lot of pressure. The O-line has been horrible, and the offense has just seen a lot of inconsistencies this year. Unfortunately, this team is still quite young. There's a lot of learning curves. They have to improve in some aspects, and right now, with how difficult it is for them to figure things out, this seems like a situation where the veteran team is going to come in and beat them pretty handily. I feel like Jim Harbaugh is going to have his guys way better prepared for this one, which is why I am ultimately picking the Chargers to win and advance to the divisional round. In my eyes, the Chargers simply have them beat on both sides of the football. The Texans offensively, like I said, there's been a lot of ups and downs. The run game hasn't been as strong lately, maybe a bit more predictable. Joe Mixon hasn't found as much production on the ground. The passing game, again, haven't been finding a lot of time to throw to open receivers, and ultimately at the end of the day, their defense leaves quite a bit to be desired because, again, they're really young there. They have a secondary that can be easily exposed, and this just seems like a game the Chargers will be better prepared for. I expect Justin Herbert to have more time to throw. He's got a better O-line, and the Chargers defense, they've taken a big-time step in the right direction this season, and I think they're going to be able to really have their way against that Texans O-line. Right now, the Texans are just a really weak team, and honestly, against most of the AFC foes, it doesn't seem like they stand much of a chance on paper. You never know what's going to happen. It's any given Sunday, well, I guess Saturday in this situation, but the Texans and their trajectory right now, not all that favorable, so you got to go with the better team. And just for the sake of spicing up the predictions a little, I'll give you a final score. I think it'll be kind of low scoring. I'll go like 23-14 Chargers. As for the other Saturday game, AFC North divisional rivalry at its best. Ravens versus Steelers. Such an intense rivalry this season. Both of their games were rather intense, and now we get to see the next iteration. We get a part 3 thanks to the playoff seeding, and this is going to be a tough one. It's always a bloodbath when these two play. And usually in this type of situation, I'd say, yeah, there's definitely a chance for the Steelers to win. Lamar and the Ravens have largely been unproven in the playoffs historically. And the Steelers, they know how to play these guys tough. They have their number. They're going to get the stops. They'll make this an interesting game. But the Steelers right now are struggling so bad offensively that I don't know if I can trust them to win. If this was like a handful of weeks ago, I might be more tempted to pick the Steelers, but they've been losing time after time, and things just keep on getting worse. Russ is most certainly not cooking right now with the turnovers, the missed throws. George Pickens has been feeling like a ghost out there, also battling injuries up until recently. Feels like things are unraveling at the seams very quickly for the Steelers. They are limping into the playoffs at this point, and while I'm not all that confident in the Ravens in the postseason, knowing their history, they are in a much better situation right now. And while I am nervous for Lamar, and I don't necessarily think he's going to have the best game against the Steelers, he has a better crutch this year compared to previous ones with his playoff struggles because he has Derrick Henry now. That is such a reliable player to have in the playoffs, and I think that's a major factor that'll help the Ravens go a lot further than usual this year. Sometimes I don't think people emphasize enough how good it is to have a reliable run game in the playoffs, especially in a cold environment. You do not want to be going up against a big guy like Derrick Henry that's going to truck you all game long in the cold, taking those mean hits. That's going to pile up, As a Giants fan, I think back to Brandon Jacobs back in the day and some of the playoff runs that he was a part of with the Giants. That stuff can really matter. It's a tone setter. And the Ravens have a guy like Derrick Henry to do that now, to be the enforcer. It just gives them an extra security blanket. He's shown that he can be an excellent playoff performer, and I think he balls out against the Steelers, and he's able to save Lamar from potentially throwing this game away, and I think the Ravens will ultimately take it 27-20. Then we're moving on to Sunday, starting with the 1 p.m. game where the Broncos are headed over to play the Buffalo Bills. And if I'm being real with y'all, I don't give the Broncos much of a chance at all. As scary as their defense may be, the Bills are just a way better football team. They have such ambitious plans this year, and I doubt the 7-seed Broncos are going to be the ones to disrupt something like that. The Bills have a tendency to choke sometimes, but usually they get the job done early on in the first round. They've got history on their side there, but also, to me, this feels like maybe the best chance they'll ever have of getting to the Super Bowl with the current iteration that we see with the Buffalo Bills. They feel a lot different compared to other teams of the past, a lot more confident in my eyes. They've made some significant changes with their roster that has really benefited them. Their play style is different. Josh Allen seems more confident as a player. I like how the Bills are playing right now, and I find it hard to believe that the Broncos will keep up with them. The Bills have them outmanned and outgunned, and while that Denver defense is scary, eventually they're going to get tired. The Bills are going to have their way. They've been an elite offense all year. Josh Allen's such a tough QB to prepare for. I think the Bills win this one pretty handily. I'm going with a 30-14 win for the Buffalo Bills here. Now, I want to give the Broncos some credit because I didn't think they'd be anywhere close to the playoffs. They won 10 freaking games this year, so congrats to them. Bo Nix, you got to give him his flowers as well. Way better than I ever could have imagined. Maybe he could have some rookie magic in him, but I personally just don't see it. This feels like a mean mismatch to me. Just a stepping stone on the way to an inevitable collision course with the Kansas City Chiefs. You got to go with the Bills to win this one. It probably should be an easy game. At the 4:30 spot, it's going to be the Packers heading over to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. This one could be pretty fun to watch just because the Packers, they haven't been that great this year, but last season they showed some playoff magic, and they could just be waiting for this moment here to unleash it again. No one really had any confidence in Green Bay last year, and look what happened. You never know this year as well, but they're definitely the underdogs, and this is going to be a tough one. They're not fortunate enough to play the fraud Cowboys this year. They're playing a legit Eagles team who have arguably been a top 3 team for most, if not all of this season. And, even though they played them close in week 1, the Eagles have come such a long way since then. The Packers, they've kind of been riding the course, a little inconsistent, maybe a little fraudulent, some might say, as they can't really beat anyone with a better record than them. And the Eagles, they've just shown constant improvement. Their rookie corners have gotten better and better as the weeks have gone on. I mean, in general, the Eagles' defense looks absolutely insane right now. And honestly, with Saquon there, man, I'm very concerned the Packers will fall behind at some point in this game. It could be pretty early on. Saquon, he seems like the type of guy that's going to go crazy in the playoffs. We saw it that one time he got to play in the postseason against the Minnesota Vikings. He went crazy in that one, and now that he's playing behind such a great Eagles O-line, this could be his day. I mean, I could genuinely see like 150 plus from him in this one. But honestly, it's not just him. In general, the Eagles just have a lot of advantages in this one. They're a significantly better football team. Again, I'm worried because the Packers never seem to play good enough against the high-level competition. They can keep it close, but they never seem to close the gap. There's no evidence to suggest that is going to change, which is why I am picking the Eagles to win this football game. And I'll say they win by a score line of, let's say, 34-24. This Packers team just ain't it this year, man. I don't have the faith. They're not captivating that same magic from the last Packers team. They don't have that same forward momentum, you know what I mean? Last year, they got hot in December. They were the surprise playoff team, and then they rode that momentum and beat Dallas, but it just hasn't been there. There's been a lot more ups and downs with this team, and they didn't have the greatest December, and I'm very concerned that their team simply is not good enough, and they're not built for it this year. They've been dealing with injuries nonstop, they don't rise up to the competition, and honestly, I don't know how healthy Jordan Love will truly be for this one. Now, I could say the same thing for Jalen Hurts, who technically is still in concussion protocol as of this recording, but based off of what I've seen from the early reports, both Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts should be ready to go for this game. I don't know if either of them will necessarily be 100%, but I'm expecting both of them to play. Now, if one of them, or, both of them, let's say, don't play, then the game could get really interesting. Maybe that opens up a world for the Packers to win, but my expectation is Jalen Hurts will be playing based off of the fact that their third-string QB, he's gone now, and they're moving back into Jalen Hurts, I'm assuming. He'll be joining the team back for practice. I think he'll be okay. And Jordan Love, even if he does play, might have to tough it out with that throwing hand. I don't really know the extent of that injury, but I'd say both of them will be ready to go. Won't matter in the end, though, because I think Philly are just the better team, and they'll take this one. Then we got a pretty interesting one on Sunday night, the Commanders versus the Buccaneers. This is probably one of the most interesting games of the weekend, at least in my opinion, because I think this could go either way. Every single year, there's that one team in the playoffs that's just really weird, that comes out of nowhere, that you weren't expecting to win a game, and they end up doing it. And I think the Commanders could certainly play that role this year because of how great Jaden Daniels has been. This is one of those games that I went back and forth on for a very long time, but ultimately, I did decide to go with Tampa Bay to win this one. I think they're going to take this 27-24. And I say that just because the Commanders are a bit more on the inexperienced side, at least with the quarterback situation with Jaden Daniels. It's true they have some other vets on the team that could certainly help out, but compared to the Bucs who just went through this last year, there's a bit of a difference there. I would trust in Baker to win this game more than Jaden Daniels. That could change in the future, but as of right now, because the guy is a rookie, I lean towards Baker making the better play, having that game-winning drive if need be. I don't know, man. Like, the Commanders, offensively, maybe they could keep up, but the problem is their defense isn't anything special, and Baker showed me he can show up in the playoffs. He's done it a couple times. Did it on Cleveland, did it last year, clapping the Eagles, and I think a similar result is going to happen here. Maybe it won't be a blowout like that Eagles game, because the Commanders, they're a pretty good team, but overall, I think the Bucs are the better football team, and they have the more reliable quarterback as of this moment, so I'm going to take them to win. I trust in Baker. This dude comes to play. This is a meaningful match. They want to get further than they did last year, and they'll beat a Commanders team that isn't quite at the same level, although I do expect it will be a pretty good game. And last but certainly not least, on the Monday night slot, the Vikings are playing the Rams. Now, this truly is probably, at least in my opinion, the hardest game to get a call on, because it feels pretty evenly matched on paper. Now, I'd argue, and I think a lot of you in the comments would argue, that the Rams should be the favorites to win this game for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, they're at home. Second off, a lot of their starters had a week to rest, which plays to their advantage compared to a Vikings team that just played their hearts out to try and get the 1 seed just to come up extremely short. Not to mention the Rams have beaten this Vikings team. Now, granted, it was like a couple of months ago, but still, they've shown us they can handle them. They're one of the only teams to really frustrate the Brian Flores defense. A lot of factors would indicate the Rams have a good opportunity to win this one. And I mean, they had to feel pretty confident whether it was the Lions or the Vikings, just because they didn't play their starters. Like, they actually purposely lost that game to Seattle, basically, by resting their guys. I mean, they almost won it, to be fair, but clearly they didn't care what seed they'd get. They'd be confident no matter what, no matter who they're playing, be it at the 3 or the 4 seed. So a lot of things would suggest that maybe the Rams are going to come out on top here. I mean, the Vikings, they're a lot more inexperienced. Sam Darnold, this is his first playoff game. You don't know what that could mean. Not to mention that Vikings teams under Kevin O'Connell, they don't exactly have the greatest track record when it comes to the playoffs. There's not much success to be had. And he's going up against the Sean McVay-led Rams. Like, this is going to be a tough game. I don't care if the Vikings have 14 wins. This is a tough matchup against a team that has proven they can beat you. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm actually going with the Vikings to win this game. It doesn't make any logical sense based off of all of the arguments I've made, but there's got to be like one strange result or like one special story that goes beyond the ordinary things that we're used to. And what better storyline than this Vikings team that has come out of nowhere and Sam freaking Darnold in his first ever playoff game. I mentioned how you don't know what you're going to get because it is his first playoff game, but I'd like to think because of how meaningful this season has been that he's going to go out there and ball out. He knows what's on the line here. This could be the difference between the Vikings giving him significantly more money or potentially maybe even moving on from him and liking JJ McCarthy more. Like, some people might argue that he's already done enough to secure his job, but it's important to do well in the playoffs. He's got to show something here. He's been playing with a chip on his shoulder this whole season, and I think he's going to confidently sling the rock. Kind of like a Daniel Jones from a couple of years ago on the Giants where it just felt like it was out of nowhere. You know, the Rams, their defense isn't all that special. I think there's room for Sam Darnold to go crazy in this one. The Rams, I mean, they've done this before. Outside of a couple of their young guys, they've played this game so many times. It could be Matt Stafford's last chance to really make a deep playoff run, but this feels a lot more meaningful to the Vikings who just don't have those big wins under their belts. They're craving for it. And on a surface level, they match up pound for pound offensively with the Rams. They could fight these guys in a shootout while also having more of an opportunity to make a stop with the Brian Flores-led defense. Maybe he can learn his lesson and be more prepared for Matt Stafford this time. Or maybe Sam Darnold says, screw it, we ball, I'm going to outduel this guy, kind of like Jared Goff did last year. This game is going to be tough, but in my opinion, Sam Darnold is not to be denied. He's going to expose the Rams secondary and win a tight shootout. I'm going to say this one goes to overtime. We're going to be ambitious. Vikings win, game-winning touchdown in overtime, 33-26. Rams can't respond. I don't know what to expect, but I'm excited about this game. It's going to be a good one. With that being said, though, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap up my predictions, who I think is going to win, and my overall thoughts on the games. I think a lot of them could be pretty good, maybe if you're going to be sleeper, but I'm pretty pumped for the playoffs. I've had to deal with the Giants all year, some terrible football. I'm excited to watch some quality play throughout this entire weekend. It's going to be great. And before I end things up, just because I like to do this tradition with other big tournaments, I'm going to show you what my pre-playoffs playoff bracket is looking like. This is me picking all the games before any of them happen. Ultimately, I am picking the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl reluctantly. It's not that I want them to win. Trust me, I would much rather that it's Buffalo or Detroit that wins the Super Bowl, but I think it's going to be Chiefs over Eagles. The Chiefs, something about their voodoo magic-like season. They feel like the team of destiny, like they're going to get that three-peat. We're going to see some kind of unprecedented history. I don't want to go against that. I can't go against the Chiefs after the last couple of years, although I do hope that I'm wrong because I would love to see either the Bills or the Lions win the Super Bowl. Will this bracket come true? Absolutely not. It'll be dead by the first day, probably. But let me know what your thoughts are for the wildcard weekend and who you think's winning the Super Bowl down in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more weekly NFL content. Peace.